Well, I'm glad that I've been on the podcast for 2 weeks, and we start off with the Bengals. What a tribute to me. Thank you, Billy. I know we're not talking Eagles today, so we said, I'm going to hook Breech up. We're going to start talking about the Bengals first.
You already been on the podcast for 2 weeks?
Well, I wasn't on last week because I was at Disney World.
And I honestly didn't notice. I'm not even being a jerk.
My God, insulting.
I noticed.
That's because I was texting you pictures of me every day with Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. Here's what I think about the Bengals. I think that on paper, this team is better than they were last year when they went 12-4. Because remember, they only played 16 games because of the canceled Bills game. They are much better than they were 2 years ago when they went 10-7. And if you look at the past 2 seasons, they could have been better if they didn't stumble out of the gate. In 2021, Joe Burrow was coming off his ACL tear, and they got off to a slow start. In 2022, Joe Burrow was coming off an appendicitis, and they got off to a slow start, started 0-2, 2 games they probably should have won if you have a completely healthy Burrow. And so this year, assuming Joe Burrow does not start the season with like bubonic plague or some other crazy ailment, I have to think this team is going to finally get off to a fast start, which they really haven't done under Burrow. And because of that, this feels like a 12 or 13 win team. So I am firmly, and I don't think this is being a homer, but I firmly entrenched in the over here.
Yeah, I actually had the, when I did, and by the way, we're talking about all the AFC North, AFC divisions today on this podcast. If you want to read my written analysis of every AFC division, it is live. Every single one of them is live on CBSSports.com. You can go check those out. Yes, I'm writing again. I'm confused by it as well. But
what should I do if I don't want to read it?
You should just sit here and listen to me talk. Fair enough. Because I'm probably going to say the exact same thing. Actually, the Bengals over is my best.
Are you reading that? That was a Michael Scott joke when he's trying to negotiate the contract for Daryl.
Yeah, I am reading that.
Boom. Roasted.
Yeah, there it is. Go ahead. Sorry.
Actually, the Bengals over is my best bet, and it's a little tricky because I wouldn't want to bet it now, except for the fact that I think like the Lamar Jackson thing matters so much for this whole division. Because if Lamar Jackson, we see the Ravens, like, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the Ravens, but like if you're betting on this division really hinges on what you think will happen with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Because I know Vegas won't want to go up to 12 for the Bengals. That's a lot. Like that's a really high number. But if they're getting 2 games against the Ravens without Lamar Jackson, and depending on what depending on where, like if it goes to the Colts, they get the 4th pick, they probably take a quarterback. Like, there's a lot of variables here. If Lamar Jackson stays, all these numbers probably just sit even. Maybe the Ravens go up a little bit, Browns come down half a game, something like that. But I think the Bengals are by far and away the best team in this division with the least question marks. And even though they lost their 2 safeties in Von Bell and Jesse Bates, as Breech has pointed out, they have his boy Dax, who's going to be developing it further. And if you take the sort of what they gained and what they lost in terms of the safeties versus getting Orlando Brown and getting a legitimate left tackle to protect Joe Burrow and to keep him from he's been the most sacked quarterback. I think the only 2 guys, him and Russell Wilson, sacked over 90 times the last 2 years. If you can get Orlando Brown in there to protect Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow doesn't deal with, coming off an ACL like last year, coming off the appendix surgery, because it wasn't even appendicitis, or 2 years ago, ACL, last year, appendicitis, they should start fast. And this is a team that's going to win 12 plus games in a 17-game season if Joe Burrow is healthy coming into the year. So I kind of want to jump on it now before something happens with Lamar Jackson, but I'm also a little nervous about an 11.5 over in the month of April.
The only issue I have is with what Breech said earlier, that they should have won the games early last season when the Steelers beat the dog crap out of them. Don't make excuses for that 4 interception game. I think it was 4 interceptions. Other than that, I agree with everything else. I like the over here. It's not, I didn't even think about it. I was just looking at the number. I said, okay, yeah, the Bengals are good. I don't even know if Lamar Jackson's healthy and he comes back to Baltimore, if it matters, because Greg Roman's gone, and I know they hated Greg Roman on the way out, but he certainly had something to do with the success in terms of how that offense was run. Maybe it didn't run its course in terms of not taking the next steps. But Lamar's unhappy. Wide receivers aren't happy because the GM makes fun of them for not being very good. I think they have a lot of questions. So Bengals over 11.5. And Breech, like I told you, when I was at Columbus, I stood next to Zach Taylor the entire CJ Stroud throwing session. And he told me, and I'm breaking news here, Jake Browning will be the starting quarterback in week 1.
Did you show him your Snoopy tattoo? That's really what I want to know.
I totally forgot to do that.
Snoopy tattoo.
Wilson, what a letdown.
Oh, Katie doesn't know that story. We'll have to tell that story on a subsequent podcast.
You don't know the Snoopy tattoo story?
I do not.
All right,
we don't have to have the whole podcast on it. We don't have time to tell it.
Again, with the making fun of my Disney fandom in the pre-show, and then all of these things come out about
No. Ryan Wilson said this is. Do you want to tell her?
No, we'll save it for another podcast. She'll have to be left to.
I mean, we're talking
we got to get to 15 more teams, Brinson.
We got to get to 15 more teams. All right, I'm going to agree with you guys and take that over for the Cincinnati Bengals. Looking at the Browns, over under 9.5, the under juice to -135. They went 7-10 last year. By all means, there should be a step up with the Browns, especially if you look at these win totals for the Ravens and the Steelers, both of those 8.5. If those aren't 10-win teams, then it's likely that the Cleveland Browns take a step up. But we were talking about Tiger Woods earlier. I don't know that Deshaun Watson can get over the public shame of what he's done. It took Tiger a very long time to get over that. I don't know that Deshaun Watson comes back that strong this year. So I'm going to go under.
I'm going under because it's the Cleveland Browns. If this team were in Canton, if this team were in, what's another city in Ohio, Breech?
Akron.
They're in Akron.
Toledo.
They're in Toledo. Name a team, name a city. If you move the Browns there, they win 11 games. In Cleveland, they're going under this number. And I say it all the time. Listen, you pay Deshaun Watson that money. He has to play like Josh Allen and or Patrick Mahomes. He is not going to do that barring the purchase of a time machine by Jimmy Haslam. So I'm going under. I think the roster is pretty good, but I just don't trust this team.
It's I'm not sure. We made it. It's weird. So we kind of have to, I guess, update the number. I don't know where the 9.5 is from, but on Caesars they've actually moved it down to 8.5. Except the over 8.5 is -175 and was actually -185 earlier in the week when I wrote the article. Under 8.5 plus 145.
Hey, by the way, sorry, Brinson, I'm going under 8.5, by the way. I didn't see the 9.5 on the screen, so go ahead.
Well, I think the under, so when I wrote the article on 8.5, and similar setup, because you're talking about if you go under 9.5 -135, I would rather go, you can't go over 8.5 -175 in April. You just can't do it. You're laying -175. It's an insane amount of juice. It's a team that has traditionally, not been great over lengthy periods of time. We do think the current leadership and the current roster is more stable than usual, but the Deshaun Watson thing, we don't know what he's going to look like. I thought he improved a little bit incrementally when he played last year, but there's not he was terrible his first game. It's a tough division. I would want to take the under 8.5 plus 145 if I was doing anything right now, because that's a great plus number. You're getting almost 1.5 to 1, and you have this, this team where like Deshaun Watson has torn his ACL twice in his career, once in college and once in the NFL. It wouldn't be shocking if, he suffered, he hasn't played a ton of football. That's just one of those things where if he suffered an injury in the offseason or the preseason, I don't think it would be entirely shocking. They have to play the NFC West, I believe, right? Breech can, the NFC West and the
AFC South.
AFC South. So there's, give and takes on whether those are good or bad. But, I think I would lean towards the under with the Browns for sure.
I'll just say real quick, I'm glad you brought up the divisions because those are a big part of what I look at in over-unders. And I feel like the AFC North has two great matchups, and I'm not going to take the over for every team in this division, but with the Browns, I specifically like it. This team went 7-10 last year. They lost 4 games by 3 points or less, including blowing a 2-touchdown lead to the Jets in like the final 2 minutes of a game. So this team was on the cusp of getting over 8.5 or even 9.5 last season. Deshaun Watson's going to be taking all the number 1 team reps in training camp. He didn't do that last season because they had to get Jacoby Brissett ready. So I do think he will look better. Maybe he's not Deshaun Watson from 2020, but I do think he'll look better than he did last year. So I think this team will look a lot better. And like you said, Brinson, they're matching up with the AFC South. I think the Browns are better, definitely better than at least 3 teams, probably better than Jacksonville too. So that's 3 or 4 wins probably should get. What, Wilson?
Better than the Jaguars?
I said I think they're better than 3 teams and maybe Jacksonville. So I definitely think they're better than the Colts and Texans and Titans, and then Jacksonville's arguable.
Okay.
And then with the NFC West, same thing. Where are the Rams right now? I don't know. The Cardinals are horrible. So it feels like the Browns could go maybe 6-2 playing the AFC South and NFC West, and then from there you only have to get 3 or 4 more wins.
If that happens, then they're going over 8.5 and probably over 9.5.
Well, that's where I'm going with this. I'm my end game here is that I'm going to be taking the over. They went 3-3 in the division last year, even though it was a tough division. I think they can do that again. So I like the over with the Browns.
And I would just say too, if you feel that way, if you're Breech, you should really go over 9.5 plus 115 versus going over 8.5 minus 175, just for the, like, if you're that confident in the Browns being good.
Yes, definitely. I would prefer the plus 115 number over 9.5.
Well, they're not going to win 8 or 9 games, so you're just throwing money away.
All right, moving on. How about those Pittsburgh Steelers win total 8.5? Books leaning towards the over here. Minus 120 is juiced there. They went 9-8 last season. Tomlin still has never had a losing season. A lot of people thought it was going to happen last season. Their win total last year, 7.5. They went over that, but there was a lot of question marks there with that QB carousel. Would it be Pickett, Trubisky? Rudolph was still in the mix. They improved their O-line. They made some good additions on an already stacked defense. I think that they're expected to compete for a playoff spot this year, so I'm going to go over on this. Wilson?
Hey, Brinson, what's the over on 16 wins? Because I want to take that.
16.
Plus 7,000.
I'll take
Plus
it.
$4 billion.
I'll take that too. I'll take them both, just to be polite.
But you're saying is you're high on Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett. I think Katie actually highlighted why they should be better. Kenny's year 2. He played much better than I thought. I didn't love him coming out, so credit to him. The offensive line's better, which is a huge issue. And they have an opportunity to get better at 17 in the draft. So I'm going to go over as well.
Yeah, I'm going over on the Steelers as well. I think it's just it's sort of a Mike Tomlin bet here, where you kind of feel good that he's going to get them to 9-8 or better. And if Kenny Pickett improves, and the offensive line is better, you a little more rapport with the weapons, and you don't have this controversy with Mitchell Trubisky coming into the year. I like the Steelers over.
I'm going to go with you guys. I'm going to agree here, and I'll keep it short and sweet. That look, I didn't think there was any way Mike Tomlin could get this team to 9 wins last season, and he did. This roster feels better than last season's roster. And you know what? Mike Tomlin knows how to beat the teams in the division. There's no reason the Steelers should have even won 3 games in the AFC North last year. They did. And if they can do that again this year, just 3 wins, then all you need is 6 out-of-conference wins, out-of-division wins, and you get there. So I like the over here, too.
And I would just note, too, that, like, the 3 games they drew, like the random, you finished X place in your division, so you get to play X team. They got the Raiders, Patriots, and Packers, which, you're talking about 3 teams with a lot of quarterback controversy this offseason, whether it's Mac Jones being traded, Aaron Rodgers possibly getting dealt, or, the Derek Carter, Jimmy G swap. It's just that's 3 good draws relative to the offseason cycle.
And Katie, you haven't been a part of this podcast when the Bengals have been bad. Breech gets to be extremely passive aggressive against me as a Steelers fan. So I suspect to see some of that, because he comes across as nice. He is nasty. He's like
the over. I took the over, Wilson.
He's a sneaky, mean.
He's sneaky. He's like, you get mean drunks. Breech is a mean, passive aggressive Bengals fans when things aren't going well.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing that later in the season.
12 years from now when Burrow retires.
Jake Browning, baby.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, Ravens over under 8.5. The over is juiced to minus 125. They went 10-7 last year. I'm not touching this until we know what's going on with Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson stays, but yeah, we don't know if he's healthy. We don't know anything. So I guess I would lean under here, but I'm not touching it.
I really think it depends. Like, you just have to, if you want to bet on the Ravens, and I agree with you, I'm not doing anything with it. But if you want to bet with the Ravens, you have to decide, you just take a stand. Do you think Lamar Jackson is coming back and playing week 1? Or do you think he will be traded or hold out for up to 10 weeks? And if you think the first thing, the former, you need to take the over at 8.5 minus 120, because it's good value right now, because it's baked in that they don't really know if Lamar is going to play. If you believe the latter, that he's either dealt or that he holds out, then you need to take the under now, because that number will come down if he is dealt or he decides to hold out. Obviously, the holdout, is sort of tricky to predict, in terms of the betting market. I'm also passing, but I would lean under right now, just because Lamar seems pretty dead set in his ways.
Breech, I'm banging the under. I just don't trust his team. Lamar, I've been saying this for however long I've been talking about it. He doesn't have an agent, so he has to be in those meetings where they're taking shots at him personally because they don't want to pay him, which is typically what your agent does for you, to absorb those conversations that you don't want to have. And maybe he holds a grudge over the course of the season. So whatever happens, and he sent that well-timed tweet out at the owners meeting that he wanted to be traded. So he's pretty bummed out. Like, he hasn't come out and gone, crazy like some players do when they went out of town. He hasn't gone into hiding into the dark room with Aaron Rodgers. But I don't know, man. Like, I have a lot of questions about this team on both sides of the ball, and it starts with Lamar and where he's at in his headspace in terms of wanting to be a Baltimore Raven going forward. So I'm going under.
Wilson, I think at this point, the Ravens would probably prefer that Lamar Jackson was in a dark room instead of ambushing his head coach with tweets at the owners meeting, like you just mentioned. Yeah, I totally agree with you guys, or agree with Wilson. I think the under is the play here, and this is where it finally comes crashing down for the Baltimore Ravens. And one thing is that, look, even if Lamar Jackson returns, you're going to get an unhappy Lamar Jackson who has to learn an entirely new offense with Todd Monken now there. And I don't know if that's going to work. And if he's not there, then you took a step back at quarterback in a division where the Bengals seem like the superior team right now. So, yeah, I think I'm winning the under here too.
People in the chat taking bets that Lamar Jackson will never play again. I don't know that I believe that. I think he'll play with the Ravens, but unhappily, and maybe
that's
not
Breech in the chat. He's the one who played with the Bengals.
This is drunk Breech right now.
Yes.
The Bengals are going to sign him as their backup, so he can't play for anyone else.
Breech is trying to imagine a world where his biggest concern, competition-wise, in the AFC North is like Deshaun Watson, who's, we don't know what we're going to get from him.
This is what he's daydreaming about when he's walking around Disney for the last 2 weeks.
That's right. He's like,
Mickey
hey,
you.
His wife's like, hey, John, do you want to go to It's a Small World? He's like, Lamar to the Colts. What?